Emily had always believed that marriage was a sacred bond. At 35, she had spent the last decade of her life building a home, supporting her husband Michael, a busy doctor, and finding fulfillment in her role as a homemaker. It was a life that had its ups and downs, but it was hers. Or so she thought. For 10 years, they had lived together, sharing the same name, the same house, but not always the same life. Emily, trusting and devoted, never suspected that her world would come crashing down so suddenly. One evening, Michael came home later than usual, and in what seemed like an ordinary moment, he dropped a bombshell that would shatter everything. "I want a divorce. I'm marrying my other woman." The words echoed in Emily's mind, each one more incomprehensible than the last. How could the man she had dedicated a decade of her life to, the man she had shared everything with, turn his back on her so coldly? The marriage was never one built on love, but it had been an arrangement. Michael's parents had pushed for this union, and Emily had been a good match. At least, that's what she thought. But now, facing the harsh reality of Michael's betrayal, a question lingered in her mind. How had she been deceived for so long? Could she really trust anything about their marriage anymore? Was it all just a lie from the start? The answer to that question would come, but only after Emily discovered something that would change everything forever. How far had Michael gone in his deception, and would she be able to get justice for all the years he had taken from her? Stay with me to find out. The shock of Michael's revelation still hung heavy in the air as Emily stood motionless, trying to process the words that had just shattered her world. "I'm marrying my other woman." The words replayed in her mind, each time more absurd than the last. Her chest tightened as she tried to find her breath, but it seemed like the ground beneath her feet had been ripped away. She stared at him, her husband of 10 years. The man she had trusted, cared for, and dedicated her life to. Michael stood there with a coldness in his eyes, his tone devoid of the affection she had once believed existed between them. He wasn't angry, wasn't remorseful. He was calm, almost distant, as if delivering the news wasn't anything more than a formality. The silence stretched on, punctuated only by the distant hum of the streetlights outside the window. Emily struggled to speak, her mind racing to make sense of what was happening. "Why? How could you do this?" Her voice cracked, and her heart felt like it was being torn in two. "Why after all these years?" she thought. "Why now?" Michael sighed, his gaze never meeting hers as he looked toward the floor. He seemed detached from the moment, like this was all just a routine to him. "We didn't marry for love," he said, as if that was the most logical explanation. Emily felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. "What do you mean we didn't marry for love?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. "We were together for so long. All this time, you never really loved me." Michael's eyes finally met hers, but there was no warmth, no tenderness, just a cool indifference. "It's true. Our marriage was more of an arrangement. My parents wanted me to marry, and you seemed like a good match." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We barely knew each other when we got married. The only thing we had in common was our last name." The words hit Emily like a slap to the face. She had always known that their marriage wasn't built on the fairy tale foundation of love. It was more a partnership, an arrangement that had been acceptable in the eyes of both families. But to hear Michael say it out loud, to admit that the last 10 years of her life had been part of a deal, it made her feel like she had been living a lie. Her mind flashed back to their wedding day. The smiles, the promises of forever, the belief that this was her life, that this was love. Had it all been nothing more than an illusion? Emily tried to steady her breath, but the hurt surged in her chest. "But, we've been together for so long. 10 years. I thought we had something real." Michael didn't respond right away. Instead, he looked away, as if deep in thought. When he finally spoke, his voice was colder than before. "Look, Emily. We had a good run. But I can't live like this anymore. You've been a good wife. A good homemaker, but I need more. I met someone at the hospital. A nurse. She's everything you're not. Exciting, fun, someone I can truly be with." He paused, his lips curling into a faint smirk. "I'm done with you." Emily felt a wave of nausea rise up in her throat. Someone else? Her husband, the man she had spent 10 years with, had found another woman. A nurse. The very profession she had dedicated herself to supporting, and now it had become the symbol of his betrayal. Her stomach turned, and for a moment, she thought she might collapse under the weight of it all. "How could you say that?" she whispered, barely able to keep her voice steady. "After all this time, after everything we've been through, how can you just turn your back on me?" But Michael was already walking away, heading toward the door. "I'm done here," he muttered, his back turned to her, as if this was the easiest thing he had ever done. Just when Emily thought she had heard it all, Michael turned to face her once more, his expression hardening. "And don't think you're going to get anything from this divorce. We never even officially registered our marriage. We were just living together, not legally married." His words hit her like a thunderclap, ringing in her ears, drowning out everything else. Not legally married? Emily's heart stopped. She had known there was something off about their relationship, something she could never quite put her finger on. But to learn that the very foundation of their marriage had been a lie, it was too much. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She felt as if she had been struck by lightning. How can this be? She managed to choke out, her voice trembling. How is that possible? We've been living as a married couple for 10 years. How could you hide something like that from me? Michael's face remained expressionless, almost cold as he shrugged. It's not like I didn't warn you. We made rules when we got married. I handled the official stuff. You stayed at home. This was always the way it was going to be. And I'm sorry you didn't figure it out sooner. But now that you know, there's nothing to be done. We're done. He turned back to the door and opened it, his final words hanging in the air. Goodbye, Emily. And with that, he was gone. Emily stood there, frozen, her mind racing. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. Her world had just collapsed, and she didn't know where to go from here. But one thing was clear: Michael had taken everything from her. Her trust. Her home. Her future. And now, it seemed he was going to take even more. The pain was unbearable, but in that moment, Emily made a vow to herself. She wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not without a fight. Emily stood there. In the silence that followed Michael's departure, the weight of his betrayal pressing heavily on her chest. Her mind was still reeling from the shock, but something deep inside her stirred. This wasn't just about a marriage falling apart, it was about being deceived, betrayed, and left with nothing. Michael had not only torn apart their relationship but had also robbed her of her future, her security, and, more importantly, her dignity. But as the realization began to sink in, a fire ignited within her. He may have walked away, she thought. But I'm not going to be the one left in the dust. She knew there was one thing Michael had underestimated: Emily wasn't helpless. She might not have been a lawyer, or a businesswoman, but she had lived in a world of secrets for 10 years. She had supported Michael without question, done everything he asked, while he kept his dark secrets hidden behind closed doors. But now, she had one thing he didn't. The truth. Still in a daze, Emily picked up her phone, her hands trembling slightly. She needed to make sense of what had happened. She needed answers. But most importantly, she needed to prepare for what was coming next. She knew Michael was going to do everything in his power to avoid responsibility. He had already threatened her with his parents' influence, with the hospital contract, with everything he could use to make her feel small, insignificant. But Emily wasn't going to be silenced. She needed to find out the truth, about their marriage, about his affair, about everything. The first step? A private investigator. The investigator was a gruff man named Jack, with years of experience in uncovering secrets. Emily explained her situation, the shock of the betrayal still evident in her voice. She told him everything about Michael, their marriage, the strange rules they had set, and most importantly, the feeling she had always had that something wasn't right. Jack listened carefully, jotting down notes, his eyes narrowing as she spoke. I'll look into it, he said simply. Don't worry, Emily. We'll find out what's really been going on. A few days later, Jack called her with the results. Emily sat down, her hands gripping the edge of the table, waiting for the news. Ma'am, Jack began, his voice calm but firm. Your suspicions were right. Your husband is having an affair. We've got evidence of him entering a hotel with a nurse from his workplace. And there's something else. It seems that you two were never legally married. He never submitted the marriage registration. The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. Michael wasn't just cheating on her, he had never even bothered to make their marriage official. All these years, she had been living a lie. The life they had built together, the years of trust and commitment, none of it had ever been real in the eyes of the law. Not legally married? Emily repeated, her voice barely a whisper. But, we've been living together as a married couple for 10 years. He's been telling everyone we were married. How could he have kept this from me? Jack sighed. It's rare, but it happens. Some people live together for years, pretend to be married, but never actually register the marriage. They just go through the motions. Your husband's been doing that. Emily's mind was spinning. It felt like the world around her was spinning too. She had given Michael everything, her trust, her heart, her loyalty, and he had taken it all for granted. But now, at least she had something. Proof. Evidence. And she wasn't about to let him get away with it. I'm not going to let him off the hook for this, she said, her voice cold with resolve. What do I do next? Jack paused, then spoke with a hint of admiration in his voice. Well, you've got options. In your case, you may have something called a common law marriage. Even though the two of you never registered your marriage, if you lived together long enough and presented yourselves as a married couple, you might be able to claim alimony and property division. I can help you with that. The word sent a spark of hope through Emily. A common law marriage. Could this be the way out? She thought. Could this be the justice I need? But she didn't want to get her hopes up too soon. There were still so many questions, so many obstacles ahead. But Emily was determined. She wasn't just going to roll over and let Michael get away with what he had done. She took a deep breath. Let's do this. I'm ready. Jack agreed to start gathering the necessary documents and evidence to prove that they had been living as a married couple. He arranged a meeting with a lawyer who specialized in common law relationships, and Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. As the days went on, Emily began to gather the pieces of her shattered life. She contacted old friends and family who could verify that she and Michael had been publicly recognized as a married couple. She dug through old photos, wedding invitations, and receipts to create a timeline of their life together. Every little piece of evidence would help her case, but the more she learned, the more Emily realized that Michael's deception went even deeper than she had ever imagined. The days following Emily's decision to take action were a blur of paperwork, legal consultations, and countless hours spent digging through memories, photos, and receipts. She met with the lawyer Jack had recommended, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Rachel. She immediately understood the gravity of Emily's situation and began to strategize the best way to move forward. Emily, based on what you've told me and the evidence you've gathered, we have a solid case for claiming alimony and property division, Rachel explained, flipping through a stack of documents. The key will be proving that you both presented yourselves as a married couple. You've got some strong witnesses, and your story checks out. The next step is to file the necessary claims. Emily nodded, but her mind was racing. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the principle. Michael had lied to her for so long, and now she was finally taking control of her life. She wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed, not after everything he had put her through. We'll need to gather more testimony from your friends and family, Rachel continued. They can speak to your public life together as a married couple. The more people who can attest to that, the stronger our case will be. Emily agreed, her determination growing stronger with each passing day. She called up her closest friends, her parents, and even some of Michael's colleagues, all of whom knew about their marriage. She carefully explained what had happened and asked if they would be willing to testify on her behalf. As Emily started preparing for the legal battle ahead, she also kept in touch with Jack, who was still investigating Michael's affair. It didn't take long for Jack to uncover more disturbing details. It seemed Michael's affair with the nurse wasn't just a fling, it had been going on for months. Jack had gathered even more evidence of the two of them together, including photos of them leaving a hotel in the middle of the night. The final blow came when Jack delivered an audio recording of a conversation he had overheard between Michael and the nurse. The conversation was chilling. Michael had been completely upfront about the fact that he never intended to make their marriage legal. He had talked about how easy it had been to keep Emily in the dark, using their arrangement to his advantage. You don't have to worry about the marriage registration, Michael had said to the nurse. We've been living like this for years, and it's not like we're legally married. She doesn't even know. Once this divorce goes through, we'll be free. I won't have to give her anything. When Emily listened to that recording, it was like a sharp knife had been driven into her chest. She had suspected for months that something wasn't right, but hearing Michael's voice, so cold, so calculating, was a wake-up call. It wasn't just a betrayal of their marriage. It was a betrayal of everything Emily had ever believed in. Her thoughts were interrupted when her phone rang. It was Rachel, and she sounded urgent. Emily, we've got a problem. Michael's lawyer is already preparing a defense, and they're going to try to argue that you were just cohabiting. They'll claim that because your marriage wasn't registered, you don't have any legal rights to claim alimony or property. But that's not true, and we need to be ready for it. Emily clenched her fists, feeling a surge of anger rise up in her. So Michael was already trying to cover his tracks. She had expected this. After all, he had been running from responsibility for so long. I'm not backing down, Emily said firmly. I don't care what he or his lawyer says. I'm ready to fight. Rachel chuckled, her tone slightly warmer now. That's the Emily I know. Don't worry. We've got this. But we need to make sure we're fully prepared. As the days turned into weeks, Emily's resolve only grew stronger. She began to meet with her lawyer more frequently, reviewing the details of her case, preparing for any argument Michael's lawyer might throw at her. But there was one more thing Emily needed to do: confront Michael, face to face. She knew that this conversation would not be easy. It would be emotionally charged, painful, and full of the kind of raw emotion she had been holding back for so long. But she was determined. She wasn't going to let Michael get away with destroying her life and walking away unscathed. One afternoon, Emily decided it was time. She had all the evidence she needed: Michael's affair, the lack of a marriage registration, the witnesses. the financial documents, and now, she was ready to deliver the final blow. She called Michael's office and set up a meeting. It was time to face him. When she arrived at his office, the tension was palpable. Michael looked at her, his face betraying no emotion, but Emily could tell he was nervous. He had to know that this wasn't going to be the same confrontation as before. This time, she was in control. "I know everything, Michael," Emily said, her voice steady and strong. "I know about your affair. I know you never registered our marriage. And I know you've been planning to leave me for months. But what I didn't know, what I never expected, was that you'd think you could just walk away without facing the consequences." Michael shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "What do you want from me, Emily? It's over. We're done." Emily's eyes narrowed. "No, Michael. It's not over. You're going to pay for what you've done to me. And I'm not talking about money. You've taken 10 years of my life. And you've treated me like I was nothing. Now, I'm taking what's mine. And I'm going to make sure the truth comes out." The cold, calculating look Michael had worn throughout their entire conversation faltered, and for the first time in years, Emily saw something like fear in his eyes, but it was too late. The confrontation with Michael had been as bitter as Emily expected, but something in her had shifted. As she left his office that day, she felt a strange sense of empowerment. For the first time in years, she was no longer a passive participant in her own life. She had taken control of the narrative. Now, the only thing left was to make sure Michael faced the consequences of his actions. Over the next few days, Emily continued to work with Rachel and Jack to build a strong case. She knew that Michael would do whatever it took to avoid taking responsibility. After all, he had already shown how far he was willing to go to cover up the truth. But Emily was ready. She wasn't going to let him off the hook this time. With Jack's help, Emily was able to uncover more incriminating evidence. It turned out that Michael had been not only hiding his affair but had also been lying about his finances, trying to hide assets that should be part of the property division. Emily felt a sickening realization wash over her. Michael had been planning this for a long time. It wasn't just about a new woman, it was about a complete escape from any responsibility. And now, he was going to learn that there was no easy way out. Emily's next step was to ensure that Michael's parents were fully aware of the situation. They had been a huge part of their marriage and had supported Michael in every decision, including the one that led to Emily's heartache. She had kept her distance from them for the most part, but now, she needed them to see the truth. She arranged a meeting with her in-laws, inviting them to her house. Her parents were already on her side, understanding the gravity of the situation. Emily knew it wouldn't be easy to convince Michael's parents. They were traditional, protective of their son, and probably couldn't see beyond their own expectations of the marriage. But Emily had to try. She needed them to understand that Michael's actions weren't just a betrayal of her, they were a betrayal of everything they had stood for as a family. When Michael's parents arrived, they seemed shocked. They didn't know what to expect. But the tension was palpable in the room. Emily's father-in-law, Mr. Roberts, sat down first, his face creased with concern. His wife, Mrs. Roberts, looked visibly uncomfortable, trying to maintain a sense of composure. "Emily, what's all this about?" Mr. Roberts asked, his voice laced with confusion. "Michael told us things were fine. We didn't expect any of this." Emily sat up straight, her gaze unwavering. She knew this was her chance to lay everything bare. "It's not fine, Mr. Roberts. Michael has been lying to you, to me, and to everyone for 10 years. He never registered our marriage. He's been cheating on me, and now, he wants a divorce. He wants to pretend like it never happened, like I don't matter." There was a long pause. Mr. Roberts stared at her, processing the words. Mrs. Roberts looked down at her hands, clearly uncomfortable. But Emily wasn't about to let them dismiss her feelings. "You've always thought of me as part of your family, haven't you?" she continued, her voice calm but firm. "You trusted Michael. But now, you need to understand the truth. He hasn't just betrayed me. He's betrayed all of us." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Emily saw something in Michael's parents that wasn't just blind loyalty to their son. Mrs. Roberts looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and shame. "We didn't know, Emily. We didn't know he was capable of this," she said quietly. "We thought we raised him better than that." Emily's heart ached at the sight of her mother-in-law's regret. But she knew this wasn't the time for sympathy. This was the time for accountability. "Michael needs to face what he's done. And I'm going to make sure he does," Emily said firmly. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I'm asking for the truth to be acknowledged. Michael needs to answer for his actions, and I won't stop until he does." There was a long silence in the room before Mr. Roberts spoke again, his voice low but resolute. "You're right, Emily. We've been blind to the truth. But now, we'll stand by you. We'll help you in any way we can." Mrs. Roberts nodded in agreement, and for the first time, Emily felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She wasn't alone in this fight. Michael's parents might have been complicit in his actions, but now they were on her side. As the meeting ended, Emily felt a sense of closure. She had told them everything. She had made them see the truth. And now, they would be a part of her journey to reclaim what was rightfully hers. The next step was to prepare for the final showdown with Michael. She had everything in place: evidence, witnesses, and the support of her family. But there was one thing left to do. She needed to make sure Michael knew that there was no escape this time. As Emily sat in the quiet of her home, her mind raced through the upcoming steps in her battle. Everything had been building toward this moment: the confrontation with Michael, the gathering of evidence, and the support she had from her family. Yet, as ready as she felt, there was a sense of unease that lingered in the back of her mind. This wasn't going to be an easy fight. Michael had power and influence on his side, but Emily had something far stronger: determination and the truth. The legal proceedings were officially underway. Emily's lawyer, Rachel, had filed for alimony and property division, and Michael had received notice of the claims. Emily didn't expect him to sit idly by. He would resist every step of the way, but she was ready for the fight. One afternoon, as Emily was going over some papers, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Rachel. "Michael's lawyer wants to meet. They're offering a settlement. They're willing to give you some property and a lump sum in exchange for dropping the claims." Emily felt a wave of disbelief wash over her. Michael was trying to settle. He thought he could just buy his way out of this. She put the phone down for a moment, taking a deep breath. She wasn't about to let him get away with it this easily. She called Rachel immediately. "Tell them I'm not interested in a settlement. I'm going to see this through." Rachel's voice was filled with understanding. "Good choice, Emily. This is your chance to show him that he can't just buy his way out of his mistakes. We'll fight for everything you deserve." The next few days were filled with more meetings, preparation, and the ongoing build-up to the day when Emily would finally face Michael in court. She was nervous, but she kept reminding herself that she wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for her dignity, for the truth, and for the years of her life that Michael had stolen from her. The day of the hearing arrived. Emily stood outside the courthouse, her palms sweaty, her heart pounding in her chest. She had always imagined this moment, dreamed of standing up to Michael and finally making him face the consequences. But now that it was real, it felt overwhelming. She was about to walk into a battle where everything she had worked for would be on the line. But Emily wasn't backing down. She had come too far to turn back now. Inside the courtroom, Michael was sitting across from her. His face was stern, but she could see the uncertainty in his eyes. He hadn't expected Emily to be so determined. She wasn't the same woman who had stood by his side for 10 years, silently accepting his lies. She was someone new, someone who knew her worth. The proceedings began, and Emily's lawyer presented the evidence: photos, testimonies from friends and family, the recording of Michael's affair, and the fact that they had been living as a married couple for over 10 years. Rachel argued that Michael had intentionally kept their marriage from being legally registered, effectively betraying Emily's trust and her rights. Michael's lawyer tried to argue that Emily had no legal standing, claiming that since the marriage wasn't registered, she wasn't entitled to alimony or property division. But Rachel countered every point with precision, reminding the court that their relationship had all the hallmarks of a legal marriage, including shared finances, joint living arrangements, and public recognition. Emily sat quietly, her heart heavy but resolute. She could feel the weight of the years of lies, the betrayal, the hurt, but she wasn't going to let that define her. This was her moment. When it was Michael's turn to speak, Emily could barely look at him. He tried to keep his cool, but she could see the cracks in his confidence. He tried to paint himself as the victim, claiming that Emily had never been happy with him, that their marriage had been nothing but a formality. He even had the nerve to try and blame her for the affair, saying that if she had been a better wife, he wouldn't have looked elsewhere. But Emily wasn't about to let him twist the truth. She stood up, her voice steady as she addressed the court. "For 10 years, I've lived in the shadow of his lies. I've supported him, I've cared for him, I've given him everything. And for what? For him to turn his back on me and act as if I'm the one at fault? Michael didn't just break our marriage. He betrayed me in every way possible. And now, he's trying to buy his way out of responsibility. But I won't let him." The room fell silent as Emily's words echoed through the courtroom. Her voice was strong, filled with conviction. For the first time in years, she felt in control of her own story. The judge, who had been listening attentively, nodded and called for a brief recess. Emily sat down, her pulse racing. She had said what needed to be said. Now, it was up to the court. When the proceedings resumed, the judge addressed the room. "After reviewing the evidence and hearing both sides, I have reached a decision." There was a pause, and Emily held her breath, her hands trembling slightly. It is clear that while there was no formal marriage registration, the couple's relationship meets the criteria of a common law marriage. Therefore, the court grants the claim for alimony and property division. Michael, you are ordered to pay alimony and to divide the shared assets accordingly. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had won. Michael had been ordered to pay for his betrayal, but it wasn't just the money that mattered to Emily. It was the sense of justice, the validation that what Michael had done was wrong. He couldn't escape the truth anymore. As she left the courthouse, Emily felt a sense of peace settle over her. The battle wasn't over yet, but she had taken the first step in reclaiming her life. And she wasn't going to stop. The days following the court's ruling were filled with a mixture of emotions for Emily. She had won the legal battle, but the process had taken a toll on her. While the financial settlement was important, it wasn't the reason she had fought so hard. It was the principle, the sense of justice, the truth being recognized. She could finally let go of the anger that had built up inside her over the years. But as much as she had gained, there was still a lingering emptiness, a reminder of the time she had lost with Michael, but Emily wasn't one to dwell on the past. She had spent so many years thinking about Michael, about what could have been, about the life they should have shared. Now, she was focused on the future. The future she could build for herself, without the shadow of her former husband hanging over her. The first step was to move out of the house they had shared. It had been a symbol of the life they had built together, but now it felt suffocating, like a reminder of the lies and the betrayal. Emily had already found a small apartment in a quiet part of town, a place where she could start fresh. The moving process was exhausting, but it was also cathartic. With each box she packed, Emily felt like she was shedding the weight of the past. She was putting the final pieces of her old life behind her, ready to embrace the new one that lay ahead. Her parents came to help her with the move. They had been her rock throughout this entire ordeal, offering their support when she needed it the most. They understood the gravity of what she had gone through, and seeing their daughter begin to heal brought them a sense of relief. As they sat together in the empty apartment, Emily felt a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Her parents were proud of her, proud of the way she had stood up for herself and taken control of her life. "You've come so far, Emily," her mother said, her voice filled with emotion. "We're so proud of you." Emily smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you too. You've been with me every step of the way." Her father chuckled. "We'll always be here for you. And we know you'll make it through this stronger than ever." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes. Emily settled into her new apartment, and she began to focus on the things that brought her joy. She took up a hobby she had always wanted to try, painting, and she started spending more time with friends, reconnecting with people she had lost touch with during her marriage. The world was wide open to her now, and she was determined to make the most of it. One evening, as Emily sat in her living room, sipping a cup of tea and looking out at the city skyline, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Rachel, her lawyer. "Michael is making one final attempt to settle. He's willing to pay you a larger lump sum if you agree to drop the property division claim." Emily stared at the message for a moment, feeling a rush of emotions. Michael was trying again. He was trying to buy his way out. But this time, she wasn't tempted. She wasn't going to settle for anything less than what she deserved. The fight had already been long and hard, and she wasn't going to let him walk away without facing the full consequences. She picked up the phone and quickly typed out a response. "Tell him no. I've moved on from him. I want nothing to do with his money or his lies. He can keep it." Rachel replied almost immediately. "Got it. I'll let him know. You've got this, Emily." A sense of calm washed over Emily as she set her phone down. She had made the right choice. Michael had tried to control her life for so long, but now she was in charge. She didn't need his money. She didn't need anything from him. She was finally free. It was then that Emily realized how much she had changed over the course of these months. She had faced betrayal, loss, and heartbreak. But in doing so, she had found herself. She was no longer the woman who had been willing to settle for a loveless marriage. She was a woman who knew her worth, a woman who was finally free to live life on her own terms. As the months passed, Emily's life slowly began to take shape in ways she had never imagined. She was no longer the woman who spent her days waiting for Michael's approval or living in the shadow of his indifference. She was someone new, someone empowered, someone who had reclaimed her life. Her new job had started off rocky, as most new jobs do, but Emily had quickly found her rhythm. She was working for a small interior design firm, something that felt both exciting and unfamiliar. It wasn't her dream job, but it was a step in the right direction. It was a job she could be proud of, a job where she could contribute her skills and creativity. The transition into this new chapter wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments where Emily wondered if she had made the right choice by leaving everything behind. She missed the security of her old life, the routines she had spent years building. But every time she felt unsure, she reminded herself that she was no longer tied to the past. She had made the choice to move forward, and with every day that passed, she could see the rewards of that decision. One afternoon, while she was at work, Emily received an unexpected message. It was from Jack, the private investigator who had helped her gather evidence during the divorce proceedings. The message simply read, "I have news about Michael. You should know what he's up to." Emily's heart skipped a beat. After everything that had happened, she had hoped to never think about Michael again. But Jack had been her ally during the darkest days, and she knew he wouldn't contact her unless it was important. She called him back immediately. "Jack, what's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "Michael's been trying to start over, but it's not going the way he planned," Jack said, his voice low. "He's been bouncing from job to job, trying to rebuild his life, but he's struggling." The affair with the nurse didn't help. Word spread quickly, and people started distancing themselves from him. "He's not the man he was before. It seems like his life's unraveling." Emily was silent for a moment, absorbing Jack's words. A small part of her felt vindicated. Michael had thought he could escape the consequences of his actions. He had thought he could move on and leave her behind, but now it seemed like life was giving him a taste of his own medicine. "Is there anything else I need to know?" Emily asked, her voice steady despite the emotion swirling inside her. "There's one more thing," Jack continued. "Michael has tried to reach out to you. I don't know if you want to talk to him, but he's asking for a second chance. I thought you should know." Emily felt a wave of bitterness rush over her. After everything, Michael still thought he could worm his way back into her life? He thought that after the way he had treated her, she would just forgive him and take him back. "No," Emily said firmly. "I'm done with him. Tell him not to contact me again." Jack didn't seem surprised. "I'll pass it on. Just wanted to make sure you were aware. He's clearly in a bad place, but that's no excuse for what he did to you." Emily hung up the phone, a sense of finality settling over her. Michael's attempt to reach out was a sign that he was struggling. He had underestimated her strength, and now he was paying the price. She didn't feel sorry for him. He had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. As the days went by, Emily continued to thrive in her new life. She reconnected with old friends, and one evening, she even met someone new. His name was Ben, and he was funny, kind, and easy to talk to. They shared similar interests, and they quickly became friends, spending time together outside of work. Emily wasn't ready to jump into a new relationship. She had learned from her past mistakes, but she was open to the idea of something new. Ben was patient, never pushing her, and they spent weeks getting to know each other. Emily felt a sense of joy she hadn't felt in years. She could talk to him without fear of judgment or deceit. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly seen and appreciated for who she was, not who she had been married to. It was a relief to be with someone who respected her space, her boundaries, and her past. They enjoyed quiet dinners, long walks, and even some late-night conversations about their hopes and dreams. Emily knew that her journey was far from over, but with every step she took, she was becoming stronger and more confident in her ability to build the life she deserved. In time, Emily found that she didn't need to hold on to the past. She had learned from it, and now she was creating a future that was all her own. Michael was a chapter in her life, a painful, deceitful chapter, but it was one she had closed for good. She had come out on the other side, and she was no longer the woman she had been in that marriage. She was Emily, the woman who had taken control of her destiny, who had risen from the ashes of betrayal and built a life of her own. It had been nearly a year since Emily had officially ended things with Michael, and while she had come a long way, she still found herself reflecting on the past from time to time. There were moments when her mind would wander back to the years she had spent with him, the years of deceit and silence. But more often than not, she found herself smiling as she looked around her new life, realizing how far she had come. Her relationship with Ben had blossomed into something deeper. Though Emily had been cautious at first, her trust in him grew with each passing day. Ben was a breath of fresh air. He never once pressured her to move faster than she was comfortable with, and he respected her need for independence. He saw her not as the woman who had been betrayed but as a strong, capable individual who had carved out her own path. As Emily sat in her apartment one evening, sipping tea and watching the city lights twinkle below, she thought about how much had changed. It was no longer just about surviving. It was about living fully, about embracing the present and looking toward the future with hope. But even as things were settling into a peaceful rhythm, there were still moments of doubt. The scars from her marriage to Michael hadn't fully healed, and there were days when she felt the weight of her past creeping back in. But she didn't let those moments define her anymore. She had learned to face them head-on, to acknowledge the pain, and then move on. It was late one evening when the unexpected happened. Emily had just gotten home from a dinner date with Ben when she found an envelope on her doorstep. It was thick. and official looking, with no return address. Her heart skipped a beat as she picked it up, recognizing the handwriting on the front, Michael's handwriting. For a moment, she stood there frozen. The last thing she wanted was to be dragged back into the past, but curiosity got the best of her. She tore open the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. Emily, I need to see you. There are things I've left unsaid. Things I should have told you a long time ago. Please meet me tomorrow at the old cafe we used to visit. I need closure. Michael. Emily stared at the letter for a long moment, feeling a mixture of anger, confusion, and disbelief. Michael still didn't get it. After everything, after all the pain he had caused, he thought he could just waltz back into her life and ask for closure? What did he think she was, someone who would welcome him back with open arms? But then, something inside her shifted. A part of her wondered if this was his attempt to genuinely apologize, to make amends for the years of deceit. Another part of her was repelled by the idea. She didn't need Michael's closure. She had already closed that chapter on her own terms. But still, there was a nagging voice in her head, telling her to go, to hear him out once and for all. It would give her the finality she needed to move forward, completely free from the past. The next day, Emily found herself standing in front of the cafe they had once frequented together. It was a small, cozy place with dim lighting and quiet tables, exactly the kind of place Michael had always loved. She hadn't been there since the divorce, and the memories of their time together felt heavy as she walked through the door. Michael was already sitting at a corner table, looking older. Then she remembered. There was a weariness in his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, Emily saw a glimpse of vulnerability in him. He looked up as she approached, his face softening in recognition. Emily, he said, standing up to greet her. I didn't think you'd come. I almost didn't, she replied, her voice cool but steady. But here I am. You said you wanted closure. What do you need to say? Michael sat back down, his hands trembling slightly as he folded the napkin on the table. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of their history hung between them like an invisible barrier. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice quieter than she remembered. I've thought a lot about what happened. About how everything fell apart. I didn't handle things well, Emily. I was selfish, and I hurt you in ways I can never take back. I wish I could undo everything, but I can't. All I can do now is apologize. Emily felt a knot form in her stomach as she listened to him. The words felt empty, as if they were just something he had rehearsed. She had heard similar things before, promises of change, of regret, but they had always come too late. I don't need your apology, Michael, Emily replied, her voice firm. What you did to me, what you put me through, it's not something I can just forgive. You don't get to rewrite the past. I spent 10 years of my life with you, and in the end, you betrayed me in ways I couldn't have even imagined. I don't need closure from you. I've already given it to myself. Michael's face fell, and for a moment, Emily could see the conflict in his eyes. He wanted her to forgive him. He wanted to be absolved of his guilt. But it was too late. She had already moved on from the person he had been, and she wasn't going to let him drag her back into the past. I'm sorry, he said again, his voice cracking. I really am. Emily stood up, ready to leave. I hope you find what you're looking for, Michael. But it's not with me. As she walked out of the cafe, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. The finality of it all was clear now. Michael was never going to change. He was still the same man who had hurt her, and she was no longer the woman who had been willing to forgive him. She had moved on. And as she walked away from the past, she realized that she didn't need his closure to move forward. She had already built the life she deserved. As the weeks passed following her final meeting with Michael, Emily found that the weight of the past was finally starting to lift. She was no longer haunted by memories of betrayal or the fear of being trapped in a life she hadn't chosen. Her days were now her own, and for the first time in years, she felt truly free. Her relationship with Ben had continued to grow steadily. They spent their weekends exploring new restaurants, hiking in nearby parks, and enjoying simple moments together. There was no rush to define their relationship or force it into any specific mold. Emily appreciated that Ben respected her space, allowing their connection to evolve naturally. She didn't feel pressured or rushed into anything, everything was just easy, and for once, it felt right. It was one evening, as they sat together on the couch watching a movie, that Ben turned to her with a thoughtful expression on his face. The comfort of the moment made Emily's heart skip a beat as she realized that something was different this time. This was someone she could see herself building a life with. Emily, Ben said softly, I know we've been taking things slow, and I want you to know that I respect where you're coming from. But I also want you to know that I'm in this for the long haul. I'm here because I care about you, and I see a future with you. I don't know where this road will take us, but I want to walk it with you. Emily's heart swelled as she looked into his eyes. She had been so afraid of trusting someone again, so terrified of making herself vulnerable after everything that had happened with Michael. But with Ben, it felt different. She didn't feel pressured, and she didn't feel like she had to hide parts of herself. Ben made her feel safe, understood, and valued, something she hadn't realized she was missing for so long. "I care about you too, Ben," Emily replied, her voice a little shaky. "More than I expected to, honestly. I'm just still trying to figure things out. But I do want to see where this goes. You've been patient, and I appreciate that." Ben smiled, his warmth radiating. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Just know that I'm here." The sincerity in his voice calmed Emily's nerves. Maybe this was what she had been waiting for all along, not perfection, but a relationship built on mutual respect, understanding, and trust. The fear that had once consumed her began to fade, replaced by a sense of hope. As the months went by, Emily's new life continued to unfold. She had gained more confidence in her work, and her professional life was thriving. She'd even begun to consider taking on bigger projects at the interior design firm. The more she worked, the more she realized how much she enjoyed being creative again, something she had abandoned during her marriage to Michael. She was finally pursuing her passions, not just for herself, but for her future. But even with all the positive changes, Emily's heart was still a little scarred. There were moments when the past crept up on her, when memories of Michael, their home, and the betrayal would surface unexpectedly. But she had learned to deal with those moments. She had learned to acknowledge the pain and then let it go. She no longer let the past control her. One evening, Emily received a call from her father. His voice was filled with excitement, and she immediately knew that something significant had happened. "Emily, you won't believe it," her father said, his voice almost shaking with anticipation. "I've been talking to the hospital board, and they've agreed to renew our contract. They told me that they've decided to work with us despite all the rumors surrounding Michael. They recognize the value of our partnership, and they're sticking with us." Emily was taken aback. The hospital had decided not to sever ties with her father's company after all. She had feared that Michael's affair and the lies about their marriage would impact her family's business. But the hospital had seen beyond the scandal and chose to continue their professional relationship with her father's company. It was a huge relief. "That's incredible, Dad," Emily said, a smile spreading across her face. "I'm so happy for you. You deserve that. I knew things would work out." Her father laughed softly. "Thanks, sweetheart. I know it's been a tough road, but everything's going to be okay. You've been through so much, and I'm proud of how you've handled everything." Emily felt her chest tighten as she listened to her father's words. His pride in her meant more than she could express. She had always felt like the world saw her as just Michael's wife, the homemaker who had no real identity beyond that role. But now, her father was seeing her as the strong, independent woman she had become. It was a validation she hadn't realized she needed. "I'm proud of you too, Dad," Emily replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I wouldn't have made it through all of this without you and Mom. You've always had my back." "I'll always have your back," her father said warmly. "Now, I want you to take some time to celebrate. You've earned it." Emily smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. There were still challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, she felt confident about the future. She wasn't defined by the past anymore. She was Emily, strong, independent, and free to live her life on her own terms. As she hung up the phone, she looked out the window, the lights of the city twinkling in the distance. For the first time in a long while, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had faced the worst, and she had come out the other side stronger than ever. Now, she was ready to continue moving forward, to embrace the life she had fought so hard to build. Months turned into a year, and Emily found herself in a place she never thought she'd be again, a place of contentment, self-love, and empowerment. Her career as an interior designer had flourished, her relationship with Ben had deepened, and most importantly, she had found peace within herself. The scars of her past, once so raw and painful, were slowly fading as she learned to live for herself, no longer defined by the woman she had been in her marriage to Michael. But just as Emily had started to feel like she had everything under control, life threw another curveball her way. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday. She had just finished a project presentation for a new client and was walking out of her office when she ran into an unexpected face. Jessica, the nurse Michael had been having an affair with. Jessica's eyes widened as she saw Emily approaching. For a moment, they just stared at each other, both of them unsure of what to say. The tension between them was palpable. "Emily," Jessica said, her voice shaky. I didn't expect to see you here." Emily stood frozen, not sure how to react. She had heard from the private investigator that Jessica had faced some fallout after Michael's affair became public knowledge, but seeing her in person, face to face, felt like an unexpected twist in her story. She had imagined that chapter with Michael was closed forever, but now, here they were, in this strange, awkward encounter. "What are you doing here?" Emily finally asked, trying to keep her composure. She had already gone through so much. And the last thing she needed was a confrontation with this woman. I work here," Jessica replied, looking a bit flustered. "I never wanted things to get out of hand the way they did. I wasn't the one who kept things going behind your back. Michael, he's the one who led me on, and save it." Emily cut in, her voice sharp. "I don't need your excuses, Jessica. I'm not here to rehash the past." Jessica looked like she wanted to say more, but instead, she just sighed, looking down at the floor. "I'm sorry, Emily," she said quietly. "For everything. I know I can't undo what happened, but I never wanted to hurt you." Emily paused. She hadn't expected an apology from Jessica, of all people. She had spent so much time hating this woman, but now, standing here, hearing her speak, she realized something. Jessica wasn't the villain in this story. Michael was. She had been another victim of his lies, just like Emily. And for the first time in a long time, Emily felt no anger toward her. Instead, she felt pity, a pity for the woman who had been just as deceived as she had been. "I've already moved on," Emily said, her voice softer now. "I've let go of all of this. You and Michael, you're both in the past. It's over." Jessica nodded, her expression a mixture of relief and sadness. "I hope you find happiness, Emily. I really do. You deserve it." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing there in a moment of stunned silence. As Emily watched her leave, a sense of clarity washed over her. She had always thought of Jessica as an enemy, someone to blame for everything that had gone wrong in her marriage. But now, she saw the situation for what it really was. Michael had played them both, and in the end, it was he who had betrayed everyone, but the difference between Jessica and herself was clear. Emily had fought for herself. She had stood up, taken control, and built a new life from the wreckage of her past. Jessica, on the other hand, had been a pawn in Michael's game, never truly understanding the depth of the hurt she had caused until it was too late. Emily had no time to feel sorry for her. She had too much to look forward to, too much to build, and too much to enjoy in her own life. She turned away from the encounter and continued walking toward the door, a quiet smile on her face. She wasn't looking back anymore. She wasn't going to be dragged into the past by anyone, not by Michael, not by Jessica, and not by the hurt they had caused her. She had learned to forgive, but forgiveness didn't mean going back. It meant moving forward, and Emily was finally free to do that. Later that evening, as she sat down with Ben to enjoy a quiet dinner, Emily shared the details of the unexpected encounter. Ben listened attentively, his eyes filled with concern and understanding. "I'm proud of you, Emily," he said, his hand gently brushing hers across the table. "You handled that with so much grace." Emily smiled, squeezing his hand in return. "I'm not who I was before, Ben. I've worked too hard to let anything or anyone pull me back into the past. I'm ready for whatever comes next. And I'm ready to build something real with you." Ben smiled back, and in that moment, Emily knew she had made the right choice in opening her heart again. This time, it wasn't about escaping from her past, it was about building a future that was hers, completely and authentically. With Ben by her side and a new chapter beginning, Emily finally felt that she had reached a place where the past was just that, the past. The future, however, was wide open, and for the first time, she was excited to see where it would take her.